Hey there, it's Jackie here. How are you? I have seen something showing up in so many client sessions. It's almost on a daily basis now, and it is having such a big deal for people in ways that majority of people have no idea about until we talk about it and until they see how it relates to what their experiences have been and what their body's been doing and how they've been feeling mentally and energetically, that the penny drops for them and they realize that they make the connections and then they can start to make changes. So everyone's innate wisdom is very different in the way that it brings up priorities, or brings up another way of saying that is brings up the things in their sessions that is the most important thing to address today. And that's what we're always doing when we're doing a session, whether it be for a person or an animal. And interestingly, this isn't the same kind of stressors that are coming up for animals that are coming up for people. However, the animals in our family matrices are very much getting impacted by our stressors, and we're seeing that massively show up in the kinds of illnesses and diseases and behavior issues that they're having. So one of the things that I've noticed that it's always been a issue, and it would show up from time to time for people, depending on what the really big things that were going on within a person that were causing them the most amount of issues at that point in time, whether it be communication issues, massive imbalances going on in the body. That would determine what their innate wisdom said on the day is, hey, this is what we need to address. So what I want to talk to you about, 3-4 years ago, yes, it would come up, but not on a constant daily basis where it's very much an issue and very much in our face like it is now. That has progressively changed since about January 2020. And I would see this also come up as an issue and be prioritized in sessions massively during periods of time when there would be really significant things going on in their environment, or like of a really grand scale. So not just happening to you personally, but things going on in the community, things going on in the country, then we would see these kinds of priorities showing up as well. So what we've seen is a massive increase in the last 2 years of what your innate wisdom describes a lot of the time as being toxic. Now, it does come up several different ways, but this is the main one that innate keeps bringing up. And one of the first ways that it will present is by wanting to address a person's chemistry, their entire chemistry, every single part of themselves that makes up their chemistry. It's the innate wisdom's way of saying, hey, can we focus on the chemistry of the body? Because there is something that the body interprets as being very, very toxic, that's having not only an impact on the chemistry of this body-mind complex, but on multiple other levels and areas in the body as well. So I think when we talk about toxicity, and it's been a bit of a, what do you call it? I don't know, a fashionable word to be used over the last 15-20 years. Quite often you'll hear it used in liver toxicity and a whole heap of other fads that have gone around. Toxicity is there for all of us. We all encounter toxicity. We all have toxicity coming into the body. We all have interactions with toxicity. Some of us are actually born with toxicity. And there are absolutely ways that we can prevent this from being anywhere near the level that it is. So we can have physical toxicity going on, but we can have many other types of toxicity as well. And this is where it's getting kind of very concerning for me, because it's not just one type of toxicity, such as a physical toxicity or a toxicity that's affecting the physical body. This is toxicity that is profoundly affecting people's minds, and the way that their minds and their head brains are able to process sensory information, the way that it's able to form thoughts, and then the way that it's able to act, react, and function for the betterment of the body. So we're seeing toxicity showing up at a physical level, at a mental, emotional level, and then toxicity that is massively impacting not only all of our energy systems, and we have an enormous amount of energy systems which unfortunately aren't well publicized or talked about. And some of those energy systems run much higher, or they're much more sophisticated than our just normal nervous system. But then some of those toxicities, they actually are in energy form. So let's do a little bit of a brief overview of the different kinds of toxicity that are commonly showing up for people now, and you might be able to make a connection maybe with yourself to see whether you feel like that's going on for you. And if you do feel like it's going on for you, not a problem. There are things that you can do to change. And if you're reluctant in changing, if you're struggling in changing, I would really ask why. Why is it such a struggle for me to be able to change that out, or eliminate that, or stop that from happening, when I know that it is having a toxic impact? Toxic is toxic. Toxic doesn't mean, oh, it's just a little bit of a problem and there's nothing really to it. Toxic doesn't mean that, it just creates this amount of disharmony and it's not going to be a big nail in the coffin on the final thing. That's not what it means at all. Toxic is toxic, and does affect you in very profound ways. And what I'm also seeing then now is a massive domino effect, where you have such incredible levels of toxicity from all different avenues, all different areas of the environment, all different parts of a person's life, that it then starts to layer up and it starts to domino. And when you've got a domino effect of toxicity happening in a person's body-mind complex, you have really significant illness, disease process, and that person will usually be really struggling in themselves with their energy levels, with their motivation, with their ability to be able to stay positive, to create motivation for themselves, to look to the future and feel bright about the future. It will affect all parts of a person. So let's look at just a few different avenues of toxicity, because I know when we've traditionally been taught about it from the past is that you think of toxicity as being something that comes into the body, usually in through the mouth, and that it can create toxicity for you. And keep in mind, we look at ourselves just for our outer layer. We look at our outer layer. We very rarely deeply connect into the fact that underneath this external layer of yours, you are filled with microbes and muscles and bones and organs and endocrine glands and sophisticated systems. So for me, one of the things that's been coming up, which has been really interesting for some people, is almost like the innate wisdom wanting to take people through a bit of a journey where they start to really make the connection with what's going on for themselves in their body, in their health, and especially as far as toxicity goes, and make the connection to that, build a deeper connection to their body, and also take responsibility for it. Because I think we're almost getting to a stage where we can't any longer, if we really truly want to have healthy lives and healthy relationships and healthy experience of ourselves, and to be happy, we've come into that point in time when we need to take responsibility for where we're at and also what's going on with us. So being able to connect in deeply to what's inside, and you might know exactly what the liver looks like, or where the liver sits, or what's involved with the respiratory system and the microbes of the respiratory system, or your lungs, or anything like that. But to begin to know and to begin to be able to connect with that, and to realize that you are the grand sum of many, right? There's much that keeps you going. So some of this toxicity that's coming in, yes, it is coming in through the pesticides and herbicides that have been leached into the ground, that then go into the food, or they're used on the food, and then they come into the body. And sometimes a client will say to me, but surely, you know, if I'm eating an orange, then it's only a tiny amount of pesticides and herbicides that I'm taking into the body. And that's true. It is only a little amount in that time. But not only will you do that again probably tomorrow, take in pesticides and herbicides to the body, or take in toxicity and through the mouth, but you did that the day before, and you did it the day before, and you did it the day before. And if we're honest with ourselves, our body-mind complex was not designed to cope with this kind of toxicity coming in just from that one area, okay? And the other thing, just as I'm going to throw this in, because another thought that I've heard from quite a few clients is, well, surely the value of the orange, or the value of the food that I'm eating, far outweighs the tiny bit of toxicity that I'm getting in. There has been an enormous amount of research and studies in the last few years, and it's been quite shocking, really, because what they've found is that majority of our large supermarkets, and that's all of us, right? Not just here in Australia, but overseas in your countries as well, are producing products which are meant to be healthy fruit and vegetables that have little to no vitamin or mineral content whatsoever. There were studies done, or testing done, on oranges here in Australia not long ago, and they were seen to contain no vitamin C. So if we're using the thought of, oh, that tiny bit of toxicity that I'm taking in through the heavy metals that come in from the ground, or the herbicides and pesticides that come in through those vegetables, you know, I'm going to offset that by the fact that I'm eating an orange, or I'm getting in 3 vegetables today, or whatever it is, right? If those foods are fundamentally dead and it's more like a filler, then that's a massive issue. Will it help if you source, say, from local farmers, from your markets and so forth like that, foods that have got no sprays, or they're organic, close to organic as they possibly can be? Will that help? Yeah, it will help, but you have to go source those. Strike up a conversation with those people, form a relationship with those farmers and with those outlets, and know where your food comes from, know how it's treated, and it will treat your body a lot better. But also then you're kind of taking responsibility for where you're at and how you want your body to show up. So that's a very rough example of just one of the many things that comes up in a session regarding toxicity, and the many conversations that we have about it as well. So yes, there is toxicity that comes in through our mouths. We can also get toxicity from medications. It can be quite often it's a situation with medications where there is an element of them that does good, but then there's an element of them that for whatever reason doesn't gel with us, our body mind complex doesn't like, and that absolutely will come up in sessions as well, where we need to try and address it and treat it the best that we possibly can with the tools and resources that we've got, because that does happen. Other forms of toxicity, you're going to have relationships and connections, people around you that are toxic. Okay, and I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that if you have a connection to someone or something that is toxic in nature, is that it just mainly mentally affects you or emotionally affects you, that there's no recourse on a physical level. And I've got to tell you, that is absolutely untrue. If you have toxicity in your life of any nature whatsoever, it is going to affect your entire body-mind complex. Your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, your level of the soul and your spirit. All of you. All of you. It can't not, right? Because we are not separate parts. We are this entire gigantic sentience and organism that has to communicate with each other in order for it to be able to function and be healthy. So it definitely affects you. That is something that you can look at and evaluate immediately is, do I have any person or any connection around me that is toxic? And as part of developing your healthy boundaries for yourself and really, really liking who you are and loving who you are as a human being, then you will eliminate that person, right? They can reassess their behavior if they want to, and they can come back at a later time and be respectful or whatever the reason for that toxicity is. And then that's your choice whether you allow that or not. But developing hard boundaries with things that are toxic is going to be really critical for us moving forward, because the body's going to have far less tolerance to keep accepting things that are toxic. If we're not advocating for ourselves, and if we're not saying to ourselves, yeah, that's not okay, I'm not doing that anymore, or I'm not going to hang out with that person anymore, or I'm not going to keep talking about those same conversations with that person anymore because it brings me down, which is toxic. It drags me through the mud, toxic. It leaves me feeling yucky, toxic, right? That's all signs and experiences, or symptoms as some people call it, that show you that's a toxic exchange. One of the biggest ones that has been coming up is around media, and especially the news, whether it be news that comes through the TV or news that comes through the radio. For myself personally, I've never really been a person that gelled with the news, with the media. So it always kind of didn't sit very well with me. Even when I was younger, I used to sit there and watch my parents watching the news, and I used to wonder what benefit we got out of hearing that some person had died in a car accident and been decapitated, and that the emergency services were traumatized, and it was the most traumatic experience or accident that they'd ever been to. And I'd sit there and think, how does that serve us? How does that benefit us? How did that just add to our life or add to our value? And although I didn't have the ability to be able to, at that point in time or that age, to really think through the psychology behind that, I most definitely have in the last 20 years. And I have to tell you, I just feel so grateful with the many, many different types of people who I get to work with over the years. And a few of them have been people that have worked in media, especially in the news sector. And I got a really big wake-up call where I really started to understand the psychology behind the media and the profound toxicity behind the media. We had major bushfires here in Australia a few years ago, and there was one channel in particular that I had a relationship with, where I would tolerate watching that channel. And I noticed very, very quickly how the energy of the broadcast was very, very high and was very dramatic and was quite frantic and was made to be very, very scary. There was very particular words, like very big descriptive words that were used every few seconds. And the focus was on the devastation. Talking about the devastation. What's the latest on the devastation? Talking about the death. How many dead? What was their story? Who was behind them? The worse the story could be, the better it was. And that really was a big aha moment for me, because I thought, this is not about delivering the information where it's a business person, because we've got to remember these are businesses, where it's a business person that is coming at news from the thought of, gosh, there are people up in Queensland that have no idea what's going down in Victoria, and I'd love to be able to share that information with them, because, you know, we're all in this together as a community. So you just share the information, right? It's not that at all. It is a psychological attack on people where, and they have very sophistically, it's not the word I'm looking for. They've been very sophisticated. Let's do it that way. I'll have to look that up later and see if I just made up a word. They've been very sophisticated and clever, and they've had a lot of money to be able to put into the resources to understand this and get access to the people that also understand this, how to use and manipulate the psychology of people to get better traction out of your product, which is the news. How to get people watching more, listening more, how to, and there are several parts of our body-mind complex which are triggered very consciously and very deliberately triggered in any newscast, not just a newscast that is when there is major issues going on, but any newscast. It is deliberately constructed in a way that it connects with very specific parts of your body-mind complex. Your nervous system is one of them. And not just any old aspect of your nervous system, but the sympathetic aspect. And the sympathetic aspect of the nervous system is literally, you have a nervous system, and it's like a light switch. It can be turned on, and when it goes with that on switch, it's almost like you're turning the dial up and it's going to 10 on the dial. When you turn the light switch off, it's like turning the dial back down to about 1 or 2. When the dial on your nervous system is turned back down to 1 or 2, that's when it's in parasympathetic mode. And that's your calm, rest, relaxed, chilled, when the body is actually able to run healing processes and repair processes. That's how we are designed to exist on a daily basis. I'll just repeat that. That's how we are designed to exist on a daily basis. That's our natural state of being. That's how we're meant to be. We have this other aspect of the nervous system, and that's when that dial gets turned all the way up to 10. And that is sympathetic mode. And that is fight mode, flight mode, or freeze mode. And sometimes we'll see that as fooling around, where people are really stressed, when they're maybe nervous or uncomfortable, they're scared, but they'll fool around. And it's lesser known, and it's harder to recognize. But we do see a lot of fight flight. Quite often we'll see people freezing before we move into an expression of fight or flight. So the business of media is psychologically wired, its entire business model is wired to connect into your sympathetic mode of your nervous system, and to either do two of things, to either trigger it into sympathetic mode within, say, the first 45, 60 seconds of that broadcast going live, because they know when they do that, they've hooked into the brain and the nervous system, and that it's hooked, it's got it, right? That's toxic. The fact that it's consciously being done is toxic. The fact that it gets done day after day after day, toxic. The fact that it has such a profoundly horrendous, catastrophic, corrosive impact on not just your nervous system but the rest of your body mind complex, toxic. Right? So toxic. And this is coming up as a priority on a daily basis for people. On a daily basis, right? There is another part of the brain that is very, very important, and it's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is very much involved with fight, flight. And what we're seeing happen now is, and this is a reason why I wanted to do today's video, to plant positive, constructive seeds so that you can, if you need to get a bit cranky about this, get cranky, stamp your feet and go, you know what, this is a crappy, toxic, horrendous relationship and I'm not doing it anymore because I deserve better. Then do that, get cranky. Or if you just get your aha moment and go, you know what, that sucks, I'm not doing that anymore, then good, do that. But I hope it plants a seed so that you can start to see the connections and how bad this is. Because if this can start to not come up as a priority in your sessions, that would be great. If it can also start to not be a factor for you and be so corrosive to your whole body mind complex, that would be great, right? It is just, it breeds disease. This breeds disease, and I just can't say it any simpler than that. Once that amygdala complex gets triggered again and again and again on a daily basis, it just starts to very quickly form a pattern of being on and being wired and being triggered. And what the amygdala is, it shouts out. It's like it has a little megaphone and it echoes out throughout the whole body mind complex. So all of you is listening to it, and it says, we have an issue, life's really bad, things are really bad, this is really bad, we're scared, you need to, do this. It's just fear. So the amygdala just starts yelling fear and worry all through the body. Why? Because it's been triggered enough that it's now got itself into a pattern and a habit, and it just does it because it's like a recursive thing that goes around and around. Plus, then we have the nervous system, which is not on 1 and it's not on 10. It's usually on about 8 all the time. So now I'm getting tons of clients where they're not in full fight, they're not in full flight, but they're at a steady 7 or 8 all the time. And it's become so... they've become so used to it that they don't even recognize that they're at a 7 or 8. They have no idea. For many people, it's been that way for so long. And if you think about the last nearly 2 years, that's a lot of people that have had triggered amygdalas and have had very triggered sympathetic nervous systems, as well as then that reverberates and goes throughout the whole body. So then you've got liver and pancreas and spleen and bones and muscles and the heart and everything going through constant stress, because that's what the messaging is that comes from the nervous system and from the brain and from the amygdala is stress, 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 stress. Things are bad, things are bad, things are very stressed, right? All from this toxic relationship and connection. So that that same old volume of 7 or 8 is what a lot of people are at, and it's become their normal. Very abnormal, but it's become their normal. And it's not until we do session and the body mind complex is able to start really running some significant repair processes, reevaluate relationships to things where things can just start to fall away, aka those toxic components, connections, peoples, things, whatever it is, then the body really starts to repair. And then the person says, oh my gosh, I had no idea how bad it was until I wasn't in it anymore. I had no idea how bad it was, right? So I have not watched the news since the bushfires that happened here in Australia. I have not listened to a news. If I'm listening to the radio, I turn it off immediately when I hear that they're going to a news broadcast, because I know the pathology behind it, and I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay. This is not about presenting news anymore. One of the things that I did want to share with you, because I was going to talk about it a second ago, I mentioned how I'm incredibly grateful for the people that I've been able to work with over the years. And over the past 3 or 4 years, there's been several people that I've had as clients and colleagues who have worked in the media/news industry. And one of them, a man, he said to me in January of 2020, he got in contact with me. He asked me if we could do a Zoom conversation. I jumped on with him really quickly, and he said, I can't stress this more. He said, please do not watch anything on the TV that's coming out. And I said to him, no problems there. I don't watch it anyway, but tell me what's going on for you. You know, maybe it'll apply to other people and it'll come up in their sessions. And he said, this isn't going anywhere. This is here to stay. This is a long-term thing now. He could see things that they were doing and saying, which showed him, which he knew, that this was just the start of a massive kind of stampede of information and fight, flight energy that was going to be put out for a very, very long time. And he said that there was many things that would be happening, but one of the main things that would be happening is that every single news broadcast, every single cross that they did to people watching them, the focus would always be on numbers, and numbers of people that were this, numbers of people that were that, numbers of people for this, numbers of people for that, and times and locations and stuff, because that's what the amygdala hooks into. And he said that when the ads come and they are off, they're not live online, the conversation between producers and the people presenting the information for those 3 minutes is, how do we make the numbers worse next cast? Because you've got to keep the amygdala and you've got to keep the nervous system hooked into the information. And the only way that you can do that is by keep feeding it. So how do you keep feeding it? You keep feeding it with more horrible, horrible information. So if there were 39 people that were dead at the last broadcast, then when we come back next, the producer is saying, find me 40. Find me 40 people dead. Find me 41 people dead. Or find me this amount of damage, right? So that when it comes back, one of the first things that you hear is, latest news is there's not 39 fatalities, there's now 40 fatalities. And the amygdala goes, oh, no, oh, this is really bad. This is really bad. Oh, we're not safe. The world's not safe, la, la, la. So there is, not only is toxicity coming up on a daily basis where it's talking about all these kinds of things that are toxic people, toxic mindsets, toxic behaviors, toxic actions, toxic businesses, toxic organizations, right? There's just a mammoth amount of toxicity. So anything that you can do to remove yourself, just remove yourself from the toxicity. And I promise you, not only will you survive without all that information, but you will thrive. I have survived. I have thrived. And a lot of people say to me, well, where do you get your information from? Majority of that information I don't need, has no bearing or impact in my life whatsoever, is non-productive and doesn't serve any value. None at all. Remember, part of that psychology is you need this. And without the information, you're lacking. So you need it, you need it. And that's quite often what comes up for a lot of people. But what do I do without the information? Because that belief system is there deeply in the subconscious that says you need that. We don't need it. We don't need it. We thrive without it, right? The very, very, very important stuff that you must know about will come to you through conversations. Even then, that's totally up to you whether what you find coming through in conversations is to your liking or if it feels good. If it doesn't feel good, it's toxic. That's my rule of thumb. Oh, that doesn't feel good. Ugh. Okay, no, not doing that conversation. Don't need any of that. Thank you very much. My feeling good or not feeling good about something or a conversation always is linked with my instincts, with my gut brain, and with my intuition. So it's not just me saying, oh, that doesn't feel good. It's like, that doesn't feel good. Like instinctively, intuitively, that doesn't feel good. Okay, so I can do without that information. Don't need it. Thank you very much. And I literally will, it's like I've got a metaphorical bin. I just kind of send it to the bin. Thank you very much. Move on. Done. Okay. So the big focus is on what can you eliminate from your existence starting today that is toxic. Okay. The other thing is, what are the things that you can do to help repair the profound chaos and miscommunication and the toxicity that's been caused from these kinds of toxins, right? And there's a lot that you can do. I would thoroughly recommend having a session with me or having a body talk session with a practitioner. I would thoroughly recommend learning the cortices technique, which is a brain balancing technique. And there's videos for that on my website or on my YouTube channel. And that is a brain balancing technique where every single time you do it, little bit by little bit, it reboots the brain and reboots the nervous system. And one of the biggest things that people notice is that they feel calmer when they do it. You can safely do that however many times a day that you want. It will not hurt you or harm you, and it will not cause any damage. So you can go ahead and do that. Just by eliminating things that you identify as being toxic, and really question why you keep something in your life that you know is toxic. Really look at that, because that is either a belief system running that, a really corrupt belief system that you do not need nor want, or it's a sabotage. All right. There are lots of people out there at the moment going through their own things. And because of what it is that they're going through, their mindset is incredibly toxic. Their energy, the exchanges they're putting out are very, very toxic. So keep a heads up for that as well. There are, yeah, gosh, I might even come back at one point in the future and kind of branch off into other areas of toxicity. But these are the ones that are really, really, really a big issue right now. You know, and if it wasn't showing up every single day for me for such a long period of time, I probably wouldn't have said much at all, but it is. So I would love it if you could share into the comments what you've identified today as being something that's toxic, that comes in, remember, and when you're watching the TV, you're bringing all that information in through the 5 senses, in through the Wei Qi system. It just circulates all through you, so it's not something that you're just watching. All of this comes in, you digest everything. So looking at whatever it is that you can eliminate from your world around you, put it into the comments. If you have any questions about anything, pop it into the comments. If you want a session, there's loads of different areas on my website where you can go ahead and book a session. Let's do this together. Let's do it as a community where every single week we are consciously focused on eliminating anything that is just not, is not right for you, right? You are worth more. You've got to advocate for yourself, and you've got to take responsibility for what comes in and around your body. It's just not okay anymore. You're definitely worth it, okay? I will talk to you guys very soon. Thanks for sticking with me. See you until next time. Bye.